Book of Utopians by Matthew Long and Jason Keith. George Ripley. George Ripley was born on October 3rd in 1802. He was the 9th child born in his family who owned a tavern. For school, George Ripley went to Harvard Divinity School. Later in life, George Ripley would go to form the Brook Farm in West Roxbury. Ripley's inspiration for Brook Farm. George Ripley got his motivation to start his movement while he was studying at school. A professor at Harvard named Levi Frisbee was the main motivation for George to start his movement. Other transcendentalist movements also inspired him to start his own. Brook Farm. Brook Farm was founded by George Ripley in 1841. Brook Farm was made with a system of agriculture and education for revenue. Many followers of the society were rich people. The society gained followers by preaching sermons to the public and by inviting distinguished transcendentalists. Decline of Brook Farm. The decline of Brook Farm was because of multiple reasons. Throughout the movement's history, there were many economic troubles. Another trouble this movement faced was a fire that burned down a large amount of Brook Farm. These troubles caused Brook Farm to end in 1846. Death of George Ripley. George Ripley died on July 4th in 1880. Ripley was mainly remembered by the Utopian Society that he started. He was also remembered for his books that he wrote after Brook Farm ended. George Ripley ended life as a rich businessman, estimated to be worth $1.5 million. John Humphrey Noyes. The year is 1811. In the town of Brattleboro, Vermont, located near the southern state border, a young child was born by the name of John Humphrey Noyes, son of John Noyes, a Presbyterian minister turned store clerk, and Polly Noyes, second cousin to the 19th President of the United States, Rutherford B. Hayes. John H. Noyes showed promise as a scholar in his youth and graduated Dartmouth in 1830. After, he chose to study law and became a clerk for a lawyer. The road to perfection. Noyes was in his early 20s and fresh out of college when the Second Great Awakening hit its peak. In 1831, he attended a revival in Putney, Vermont that was led by a disciple of Charles Grandison Finney. After being saved of his sins, Noyes strayed from the path of traditional Christian religions. Instead of following the cycle of sin and repent, Noyes believed that once you had been saved, once you accepted Jesus into your heart, you could never sin again. Noyes enrolled in Andover Seminary and then Yale Divinity School to further his religious ideas. High tide of spirit. On February 20th, 1834, during a practice of mutual criticism where the students of Yale would reflect on each other in order to promote self-improvement, an idea which would later become a foundation for the united community, Noyes confessed to his fellow students that he believed he was free of sin, an event that would later be called the High Tide of Spirit. Noyes was promptly expelled from the school and spent the next 12 years wandering the greater Northeast building upon his philosophy. During this time, Noyes developed many ideas. However, two that would become his most prevalent are that Noyes was God's chosen one who would lead the way to the establishment of Jesus' kingdom on earth, and the idea of complex marriage, where all the women of a community were wives to all the men, and all the men were husbands to all the women. The birth of Oneida. After arriving on the idea that God had chosen him to build his kingdom on earth, Noyes went to work. In 1836, he established a community at Putney, Vermont. However, in 1847, charges were pressed against him on the basis of adultery. Noyes and the members of Putney fled to Oneida, New York to avoid arrest, and founded their new community there. Noyes used the ideas of complex marriage, mutual criticism, and divine authority to establish a strong social structure that was a mixture of a theocracy and a communist society, which was described by the term Bible communism. Heaven on Earth. The Oneida community started out on a bumpy road, but after a few years it had quickly become an economic and social success. The community was filled with intellectual and cultural activities that all members participated in order to improve themselves. The community was a stronghold of doctors, chemists, and writers who would later be sent out to Yale to participate in the most modern versions of their fields. The community had also grown economically after the arrival of Sewell Newhouse. Newhouse brought with him an innovative type of animal trap, which was improved upon at Oneida and quickly grew to be the major source of income for the community. This helped to change the community from a shaky agricultural economy to a major industrial center. The labor in the community was thought of as a form of entertainment, and most members enjoyed working. Women and men were given the same jobs and worked for roughly the same amount of hours per day. However, women were still thought to be inferior. The freedoms given to women were still beyond the freedoms of the outside world at that time. Exile. In 1879, Noyes was challenged by the law again, this time in the form of statutory rape charges. Noyes fled to the Canadian side of the Niagara Falls, where he held a loose grip on the reins of the Oneida community. Noyes delivered the killing blow to the community when he ended the enforcement of complex marriages. As couples formed, they began to look after their own interests instead of the community's. In combination with this, Theodore Noyes, John's son, took the position as leader. Theodore is unable to maintain the community due to his lack of charisma and define authority, and the united community became forlorn. The community was developed into a company based in silverware production called Oneida Limited, which still exists to this day. John stayed in exile until his death 7 years later.